You want me to put that on my todger?
Harry's wife, NFI, King's Birthday. For those of you who aren't familiar with the acronym NFI, it means not fucking invited. And the Daily Mail, through Richard Eden, reports no invitation to the King's Birthday Parade for the Sussexes. When the Duke and Duchess of Sussex quit royal duties 3 years ago, Queen Elizabeth said they would always be much-loved members of my family. She was speaking as a normal, exhibiting emotional empathy for her grandson and her granddaughter-in-law. And Buckingham Palace officials were keen to stress that they would continue to be invited to family events. Of course, all of that was being stated prior to the repeated behaviours that we have witnessed, where they have cocked a snook at the royal family, that they have smeared them, that they made the damaging disclosures of false accusations of racism in the Oprah bombshell interview, where they have failed to turn up for some events, turned up for others and behaved badly in terms of Harry's wife seeking out the camera, turning up apparently wired for sound, disclosing things that they ought not to disclose, repeatedly whinging and whining about the way that they have been treated, with the consequence that they became not trusted. When the Queen uttered that, she, of course, knew that Harry's wife was problematic, but perhaps did not envisage the problems that then occurred over the last few years. Ditto with the Buckingham Palace officials that would state, yes, we'd invite them. But quite simply, if someone is going to keep shitting on you from a great height, you're going to be less inclined to want to involve them, aren't you? And therefore, the consequence is that Prince Harry and Harry's wife have not been invited to the King's Birthday Parade next weekend. It will be the first time in Harry's life that he has not been welcome at the monarch's official birthday celebrations. This year's event is particularly significant because it is the first since his father succeeded to the throne last September. This, of course, is being driven by Charles nullifying the threat to control and, in effect, giving an absent silent treatment to both Harry and Harry's wife by keeping them on the shelf and not taking them off by inviting them to the King's birthday celebrations. It is a way of him asserting control over them as non-intimate secondary sources in his feudal matrix. For Harry, this is yet again another example of the downsides that have occurred as a consequence of his ensnarement with his wife. Of course, Harry, his view jaundiced by his own emotional thinking and the manipulations that his wife continues to weave around him, won't recognise it as, fuck, I've not been invited because of the way that me and my wife have behaved. I'm embarrassed and ashamed. I need to sort myself out. I need to do something to repair these bridges. I'm going to ring up Pa and apologise and ask to come and see him and have a good chat about all of this. And I'll do it on my own because I recognise that many of these problems have occurred as a consequence of my wife's behaviour. I'm not going to demand that I be given an apology first. I'm going to offer an unconditional apology. That's the way that Harry ought to approach it, but he won't because he can't see it, because he is so wrapped up, as I mentioned, in his emotional thinking and the fog that has been generated by Harry's wife. Instead, he will just be persuaded that it's another instance of the royal family and his father in particular being horrible to them just because they wanted to strike out and seek a life for themselves. I told you, Harry, this is the way that they would behave. They're racist and hateful. We made the right decision to move to California. Harry sits there wondering why he hasn't got any friends and family in California and why nobody wants to come and visit them, but nevertheless nods obediently as his wife convinces him once again that they did the right thing by moving to California. She, of course, will not recognise that this is anything of her own doing. Whilst Harry has the potential for doing so, but at the moment can't because of the fog that surrounds him, Harry's wife will never be able to notice that it's her fault. She will not sit there and think to herself, we've not been invited, and that's because of the way that we've carried on. It's no wonder that they don't want us attending, because we've caused so many problems for them. Her narcissism will not allow her to compute it in that way. Instead, her narcissism says, how dare they treat us like this? Once again, this is evidence that I am the victim, that they are horrible and hateful people. The king always had it in for me. He squeezed my ass when I walked down the aisle. Revision of history. You may laugh at such a suggestion, but that's the type of thing that narcissists do. As a consequence of things not going their way, because this will wound Harry's wife, her narcissism will paint Charles black and will cause her to view past events through a lens of black. This is often an instance where, for example, and this has happened with many people that I advised in consultation, that a man has been hoovered back in by a female narcissist after the end of the relationship. And often these female narcissists use the old spicy poontang. They utilize sex as a means of mass seduction. And accordingly, there is the old make-up sex that takes place. The hypersexual female narcissist, a somatic, goes hell for leather, banging the brains out of the man, and he thinks, wow, great sex. However, having now got him under control, but under no need to put him back as the intimate partner primary source, he is then popped back on the shelf, retaining status as former intimate partner primary source, and can't understand why. He then complains about this treatment to the narcissist, who then suggests that he raped her. This is done because, although she hoovered it in and acted in a benign way by having consensual sex with him, the fact that when she pops him on the shelf, he understandably doesn't like that. He then complains about her behaviour to both her and to other people, thus threatening her sense of control. He becomes painted black, and the response of that is to smear him. And the narcissism revises history to suggest that she didn't consent to the sex, that he came and had his wicked way with her, and in effect raped her. I've dealt with several men that have found themselves in such a situation, and I've been able to bring them clarity as to why that has happened. Similarly for Harry's wife, she will, through the lens of blackness, cause people to be viewed in a malign way, whereupon once she viewed them favourably, they will be viewed unfavourably. And this is the case with Charles, because his failure to invite them, notwithstanding it being an assertion of control on his part, but will be done based upon the truth, namely their own behaviour, Harry's wife's narcissism will just not accept that. She'll be wounded by this failure. The wounding will be moderate in terms of what Charles has done, but then the wounding becomes all the more increased as a consequence of people being aware of the fact that she and Harry have been NFI'd. The Mail continues by explaining, "I'm afraid it's a reflection of the state of relations at the moment," a source told the Daily Mail. The couple flew over from California for last year's Trooping the Colour, which became part of Queen Elizabeth's Platinum Jubilee weekend. They were invited by the late Queen to watch the ceremony with other members of the royal family from offices overlooking Horse Guards Parade, and you remember this was the shushing of the colour. Long-lens photographers captured through the window grainy shots of the couple briefly larking around with the young children of Zara and Mike Tyndall. They were not, however, asked to be on the Buckingham Palace balcony, substantial wounding, for the official flypast later in the day. Since last June, Harry and Harry's wife have done much to damage relations with the royal family. The article then lists a number of things that they've done which has caused this damage. Of course, Harry's wife will not see that it's the behaviour, the damage that she's caused towards the royal family, that has prompted the king to utilise the truth to assert control over her. Instead, she's wounded by this failure, and her narcissism will simply blame Charles for being nasty and a hater. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.